We begin, though, this morning with President Biden wrapping up that major overseas trip, heading home where a number of issues await him.
During the president's six-day visit to Europe, he met with G7 and NATO leaders, a trip designed to show the continued strength between America and our European allies amid Russia's ongoing war in Europe. But it has often been overshadowed by a range of issues here in the U.S. as the country remains divided over the Supreme Court's landmark ruling to overturn Roe. On top of that, inflation continues to put pressure on Americans' wallets. New polling from the Associated Press shows just how frustrated Americans are with the direction the country is going. 85% say the country is heading in the wrong direction, including 78% of Democrats, a sign of widespread pessimism with the midterm election about 4 months away. Shannon Pettypiece, the senior White House reporter for NBC News Digital, joins us now from Madrid, where the president is. Let's start with that poll. This is not good news for the White House. The president has a lot on his plate when he does return home. I mean, what's his priority?
Well, I will say he has been very silent on domestic issues here during these 5 days of meetings he's had now in Madrid and before in Germany. We expect that to change later today. He is going to have a press conference about an hour from now, where certainly the reporters in the room will be asking about these issues you mentioned: inflation, abortion, the January 6 hearings. So we'll have an opportunity then to hear more from the president. But even on this issue of inflation, which you noted is a top issue that's weighing on voters, we've seen very little discussion or action from the president or world leaders here trying to address inflation, which has really become a global problem. It certainly is a problem in the developed world, but even more so in lower income countries, as the war in Ukraine's driven up the price of fuel and the price of food. When the president gets back to Washington, White House officials aren't indicating we should expect to see any major changes or policy shifts on that front when it comes to inflation. The president has said there's not much he can do at this point about the high price of oil, given the war and the global gas market and constraints, in things like oil pumping and refineries. And then also on the abortion front, White House officials have also indicated there's not much that they can do from a policy front. We have seen some efforts along the margins from the administration to try and make sure access remains where it is legal in states. But we are told not to expect any big shifts there as well. So certainly, as you noted, a lot of issues the president is going to be confronting when he gets back home later today.
Yeah, I mean, with the issue of inflation, the president has repeatedly argued that it is a product of the war with Russia against Ukraine and what they started in Ukraine. It's something maybe a lot of Republicans would dispute. How much did the president discuss with other world leaders that idea of the Russian war impacting the economy while he was in Europe this past week?
Right. Well, there's been a major acknowledgement among world leaders that ultimately the solution to these problems with food shortages, rising food prices, rising fuel prices, supply chain disruption, ultimately a major solution to that is going to be ending this conflict. So much of the focus, much of this conversation was on continuing to support Ukraine militarily, humanitarily, and also ratcheting up the pressure on Russia to whatever extent they can at this point. There was a ban imposed from the G7 countries on gold imports, and we expect there to be further discussions about a potential price cap on oil imports in those countries.
All right, Shannon Pettypiece, thank you so much.
Now, all this economic stress is taking a toll here at home and on a lot of people's summer vacations. A new survey by personal finance company NerdWallet found that of the nearly 7 in 10 Americans who say they're traveling this summer, 81% say inflation will impact their plans. Joining us now is NerdWallet travel expert Sarah Rathner. Sarah, good morning. Thanks for your time. So, I mean, really, any way you look at it, travel has been a nightmare. I mean, I've been stuck in many airports several times already this summer. We know about gas prices. Now, an overwhelming majority of travelers are rethinking their summer trips. How are they changing their plans?
So travelers are having to get creative. Maybe they would have flown, but now they're choosing to drive so they don't have to deal with crowds at airports and long lines and delays. People are traveling closer to home. They're traveling for shorter periods of time, knocking a few days off of their trip just to save on all these costs. And actually 41% of Americans told us that they're planning on likely going into credit card debt to fund those summer travel expenses.
Oh, wow. I know your survey found specifically that travel by car is the most popular option for Americans this year. Why are so many people road tripping if that's how gas prices are? Is it because of how tough flights have been?
It could depend partially on where they're going, but also if you've been at an airport lately, you know how chaotic it can get. My husband traveled for work last week and it took him a half hour just to check his bag. So if you're going to the airport this weekend, you need to give yourself a lot of extra time just to get through all of these lines.
Sarah, what everyone is wondering is how can we save money? Do you have any tips for that?
Yeah, so when you're traveling, obviously everybody thinks about hotels and flights and rental cars, the big three travel bookings, but you're also going to be spending a lot of money on things like tourist attractions and food, especially food, every day. So you want to limit how many expensive meals you have to buy. If there's a fancy restaurant you really want to try, go for lunch. It's usually a less expensive meal. You might want to consider staying in a vacation rental with a kitchen so you can cook, or at least booking a hotel that offers free breakfast, maybe a free happy hour with snacks.
Sarah Rathner, great tips there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And with the travel weekend upon us, a lot of folks are wondering about the weather.
Absolutely, which means Michelle Grossman's here to fill us in. What are we looking at?
Hi there, guys. We do have some bumps in the road, so to speak. We're looking at some rain. I know, of course, right?
No matter what.
Yeah, right. We're looking at some, at least today, we're looking at some problems in the southeast. But as we near the holiday weekend on Saturday, we're looking at a lot of us on the East Coast seeing some rain. So let's start with today because we are looking at those scattered showers and storms, some heavy downpours. We still have that area of low pressure in the Gulf. We have a frontal boundary that's kind of draped over the area. It's parked in place. And that's why we're seeing these repeated rounds of showers and storms. We've watched them for days. We're going to continue to watch them throughout the holiday weekend as well. So today, combining that boundary with that area of low pressure, we're looking at tropical downpours along the Texas coast. We could see up to 7 inches of rain in some spots. And then scattered storms from Louisiana to Florida. This is what it looks like in terms of your rainfall forecast, where you see these darker colors, the yellows, the oranges, the reds. That's where we're seeing a lot of rain. So soaking rain along the Carolina coast into the southeast, all through the Gulf Coast and also through the eastern parts of Texas. So even 4 or 5 inches of rain. But this is where we're going to see the most rain. Where you see this red right along the coast is where we're going to see 7 inches. Beneficial rain. We're in extreme drought there, but we're going to see this pretty fast. We could see some flash flooding. Also looking at the chance of some severe weather today in the upper Midwest, also parts of the northern Great Lakes, with winds gusting up to 60 miles per hour, damaging hail, and an isolated tornado is possible. That's this evening into also the afternoon hours. Hot and humid once again nearing the July 4th weekend. We're looking at temperatures in the 90s today. Chicago, 10 degrees above average for this time of year, in the mid 90s. Same story in Omaha. Buffalo, we're looking at 83 degrees. Then as we go throughout tomorrow, temperatures climbing into the 90s once again in Philadelphia. It's going to feel like 97 degrees. 94 is what it'll feel like in Richmond. And it's going to feel like 95 in Cincinnati. We'll keep that warm air in place for the holidays. Temperatures in the 90s in Charlotte and Richmond by Monday, upper 80s. New York City, warm one too, into the upper 80s by Monday. So for today, the rest of the country, we're looking at that monsoonal moisture in the southwest still continuing. Warm in the middle of the country, the central and southern plains. Continuing to watch that rain falling in the southeast. Now let's look towards the weekend because it's kind of a rinse and repeat type situation. Storms from the northeast into the southeast. Same story on Saturday, guys. We're going to start out wet. Much of the east. We're looking at scattered storms from New England down to the southeast.
So hot and stormy. Okay.
Yeah, does that sound great for holiday?
Yeah, really just fabulous weather for the hair, for everything.
Monday's looking really good in the northeast out, like fabulous.
That's good.
Okay.
Yeah. Fireworks. All right.
All right.
Exactly.
Thanks, Michelle.
Sure.
Turning now to the growing battle over the future of abortion rights in this country. As a number of states take steps to ban abortion, some doctors are concerned fertility treatments like IVF could be the next target. They question if a patient's frozen embryos could be defined as unborn children, and if so, what happens if those embryos are discarded? NBC News correspondent Antonia Hilton joins us now from a Boston IVF clinic in Massachusetts with the latest. Antonia, good morning to you. So right now, is this decision affecting patients who are currently undergoing IVF treatments at all?
Good morning, Joe. Well, it's certainly affecting their thinking. As of right now, there are no laws that directly impact IVF that are going to stop patients from going to their appointments and moving forward with this process. But because new laws are likely going to be introduced by anti-abortion activists or lawmakers in the coming days and months, the patients and providers that I've spoken to say that they're nervous that the legal landscape is going to change. In particular, that there could be personhood laws that define the meeting of sperm and egg, an embryo, as a life. That directly implicates the work that doctors do in labs like the one behind me here, where they not only create, they at times destroy or test these materials. So the patients that I've talked to say that they are moving up their timelines. Some of the women who have already created embryos are planning to use them. In other words, get pregnant sooner than they were originally planning to. Take a listen to a conversation that I had with a woman named Samira Valdez, and she lives in Florida.
Sometimes it takes multiple egg retrievals, multiple embryo transfers, and it's emotionally draining. So if you can imagine now all this coming to play for so many families, we're stressed and we're nervous now. It's very overwhelming. My husband and I were kind of going to wait maybe like 2 or 3 years after my daughter, just to kind of give us time with the one child. But this is definitely making me want to move faster and try to make a decision sooner than later.
Samira, as she described right there, is planning to have her next child now 2 to 3 years earlier than she had initially planned. And not only does that change their family, but that is a significant cost. These procedures cost thousands of dollars. Often insurance programs do not cover it. And so families in this situation are now thinking about, the makeup of their family, but also their budgets. The clinic behind me here, Boston IVF, says that they have been receiving over 50 calls a day from patients who live in red states who are interested in transferring their tissues from those states here to Massachusetts, a blue state where they think that they might be a little bit safer, Joe.
It's not just patients, Antonia. Are some doctors concerned that their work could soon become criminalized? I mean, what did you learn from some of the doctors you spoke with?
That's right. In the event that either a vaguely written bill or someone directly passes a personhood law to define an embryo as a living being, in the event that that moves forward in any state, that would directly criminalize the work that they do here in clinics like this one. And in the state of Oklahoma, where already they have an abortion law that is quite similar to what we saw in Texas, where an individual can sue anyone who they believe has been involved in an abortion. It opens the window for any prosecutor or person who believes that what they think goes on in a clinic like this one amounts to an abortion. They create multiple embryos at a time. They sometimes remove them. Families sometimes ask to destroy them. And so the question is that life? Is that an abortion? And they're nervous that no matter what lawmakers, assure them may be the case, that it would just take one prosecutor or person or a group of lawmakers to see it differently to change the legal landscape. Take a listen to a conversation I had with a doctor, Dr. Reshef in Oklahoma. He works at his own fertility site, and he's preparing for the possibility of lawsuits.
New law in Oklahoma opens the door for lay people to sue anybody that they feel is engaged in abortion. So the annoyance factor from being sued, of course, clearly interferes with my work and my patient's right to reproduce. People that either deliberately or unintentionally, by not knowing the law and not knowing the definitions, will sue us because they perceive that we're committing abortions. I think that's a travesty, all right.
Doctors are already meeting with their lawyers to determine what kinds of new programs, tissue transfers they might do. Is this going to cost them money, or are they going to charge the patients out of pocket for all of this? So they are scrambling to try to secure their industry, essentially, over the next couple weeks and months, Joe.
Clearly a lot of questions on a lot of minds right now. Antonia Hilton in Massachusetts, thank you so much.
Now to some disturbing news this morning here in New York. A woman was shot dead on Manhattan's Upper East Side last night while pushing her 3-month-old baby in a stroller, according to police. Authorities say the gunman approached the woman from behind and shot her once in the head at close range before fleeing. WNBC reporter Gabby Acevedo joins us now near the scene of the shooting. Hey, good morning. So what do we know so far about the victim and her baby?
Good morning, Savannah, to you and to your viewers. What we know at this point is that this 20-year-old mother had a previous case that she had filed for domestic violence, but we do not know at this point if that had anything to do with the shooting. I want to show you what's happening right now as neighbors are waking up in the Upper East Side. We are on East 95th Street between 3rd Avenue and Lexington, and what you see there is the crime scene, which was semi-clear. There's still a police guard patrolling the area and guarding the zone. At the scene, officers recovered a bullet casing and scouted the block for possible surveillance video. Witnesses told us that kids were actually playing at a park nearby close to Lexington Avenue when they heard the gunshot. As for Mayor Eric Adams, he made his way out to the scene last night, Savannah, and he said that New Yorkers cannot allow the epidemic of gun violence to continue in the city.
And has the NYPD released any details about a potential suspect in the shooting?
That is right now the most important detail, Savannah. Obviously, the suspect, who is the shooter. The description right now is too vague. A man wearing all black who they say left the scene on foot here on East 95th Street. The relationship between the shooter and the victim is unclear. The good news as far as that baby is concerned, that 3-month-old, he was not injured in the shooting. But again, very little details in terms of that suspect, that shooter. And that's why surveillance video at this point will have to play a large role in this investigation, even though this happened after or close to 8:30 last night.
All right, Gabby Acevedo, thank you so much.
Now to the fallout from that explosive testimony from former White House aide Cassidy Hutchinson during Tuesday's January 6th hearing. One of the key figures mentioned was former White House counsel Pat Cipolloni, who has now been subpoenaed by the committee that's investigating the Capitol attack. Committee leaders had initially asked Cipolloni to appear, but now they're taking this official step. They made that decision after hearing Hutchinson's testimony under oath, saying that Cipolloni had raised legal concerns about Trump.
Mr. Cipolloni said something to the effect of, please make sure we don't go up to the Capitol, Cassidy. Keep in touch with me. We're going to get charged with every crime imaginable if we make that movement happen.
NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Raffa joins us now. Ali, good morning to you. So Cipolloni was described by Hutchinson as one of those last firewalls in the effort to stop Trump on January 6th. What do we know right now about his willingness to cooperate, and how much of a key figure really is he in all of this?
Yeah, good morning, Joe. She mentioned his name quite a few times during her testimony on Tuesday. And we know, as you mentioned at the top there, that he has sat down privately with the committee to answer their questions months ago. But since then, he's been very hesitant to speak on the record, citing executive privilege concerns, essentially saying he's been very, very careful what he can and cannot say about his private conversations with former President Trump to the committee. But then you see this subpoena come out yesterday. The committee saying, quote, they want him to speak for a deposition on Wednesday, July 6th, saying in the subpoena, quote, you've declined to cooperate with us further, including on the record testimony, saying they now have no choice but to issue the subpoena. Take a listen to what really the committee could learn from Cipolloni, from the committee members themselves.
He has a huge volume of relevant evidence, and he was there at every level of each of these assaults on democracy and the rule of law.
His knowledge of the propensity for violence that day, his knowledge that the president and others may be breaking the law that day, I think is very important.
And we've heard him mentioned not just in Hutchinson's testimony, but really throughout these public hearings since they began. Remember, in one of the first hearings, Liz Cheney asked Jared Kushner in a pre-recorded clip that the committee played whether Pat Cipolloni ever threatened to resign. Kushner really equating his threats of resignation to what he called whining. We heard DOJ officials even say that Cipolloni defended and supported them as they were having those private meetings with the former president, that pressure campaign against the Justice Department. And then you heard her say on Tuesday that Cipolloni was one of those people who came into Mark Meadows' office and said, you know, we need to do something as the Capitol was being attacked, saying, you know, if someone, essentially Hutchinson saying, I'm paraphrasing here, but her saying that if something happens, someone gets killed, that the blood would be on Meadows' hands, Joe.
So since that testimony from Hutchinson, there has been pushback from some Republicans on some of the things that she said. For example, both Mark Meadows and Rudy Giuliani have denied that they asked for pardons. And then there were those allegations that she made about an alleged confrontation between former President Trump and members of the Secret Service. How is Hutchinson now responding to some of that pushback?
Yeah, and you also have former White House counsel Eric Hirschman now saying that he was the one that wrote that note that the committee presented, even though Hutchinson under oath said it was her. She even identified the note as her own handwriting. But the committee and Hutchinson, they're both standing by the testimony she gave on Tuesday, the committee calling her still a credible witness. Hutchinson coming out yesterday through her attorneys issuing a statement saying that she still stands behind her testimony and that she's proud of the work that she has done both in the White House and her service to the country through her testimony on Tuesday. And so I don't really think it's surprising that, you know, former members of Trump world are now coming out and trying to debunk or poke holes in parts of her testimony. I think the committee very much expected this to happen, and I think that was really part of their planning in waiting so long to announce just the plans for her to come and testify, why everything was waited until the last minute before it became official, Joe.
I mean, Allie, we know the next hearing isn't scheduled till next month. Quickly, do we know what's next? Where does the committee plan to go from here?
Well, we know they are very much interested, as we mentioned, in speaking with Cipolloni. We're also monitoring really the progress they make in trying to talk with Justice Clarence Thomas's wife, Ginny Thomas. And we heard in the last hearing that they're now looking into how to prevent any sort of witness coercion or intimidation, that they have evidence has already happened through emails, phone calls, texts against their witnesses that have testified and that plan to come testify. So definitely a lot on their plates the next 2 weeks for this 4th of July recess, Joe.
All right, Allie Raffa, thank you so much, Allie. Appreciate it.
R. Kelly will spend the next 30 years in prison. The former R&B superstar was sentenced Wednesday after being convicted of 9 counts of sex trafficking and racketeering. During the trial, prosecutors said Kelly was a serial sexual predator who abused young women for more than 2 decades. The 30-year sentence will be followed by 5 years of supervised release and also includes a $100,000 fine.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.